few months ago, when I asked 30 Zelda content creators what they wanted to see in the next big mainline 3D Zelda game, there was one answer more common than any other: better dungeons. This was one of the most prevalent criticisms of Breath of the Wild back when it launched in 2017, that the abandonment of the traditional Zelda formula by breaking up the larger thematic dungeons into the 4 divine beasts and the bite-sized shrines spread across the map left some players feeling underwhelmed, like a big part of what made them love Zelda was missing from this new iteration. So naturally, when a direct sequel to Breath of the Wild was announced, proper Zelda dungeons were among the most often discussed wishes for the game. Wishes that it seemed like the Zelda team had listened to. In an Ask the Developer interview shortly before Tears of the Kingdom's release, Satoru Takizawa noted that making a wide variety was pretty challenging. The 4 divine beasts were the dungeons in the last game, and they shared similar designs. This time, the dungeons are huge and each carry their own regional look and feel, just like traditional The Legend of Zelda games. We think they'll provide a satisfying challenge for players. They were certainly a challenge to develop. So, did they succeed in fixing Breath of the Wild's dungeon problem? No. While clear steps were made to improve on the monotonous divine beasts and Sheikah shrines, Tears of the Kingdom's dungeons still fall far below the standard set by previous Zelda games. They still don't fully realise the goal of blending traditional Zelda dungeons with the series' new open-air overworld. And since we know that the next big 3D Zelda will follow in Tears of the Kingdom's footsteps as another open-air adventure, it seems that, in order to truly meet Zelda fans' expectations, it needs to make another attempt at solving this problem. So let's talk about it. First, we need to recognise that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom both sold an astronomical amount of copies, enough that there must be many Zelda fans who've never played any of the older games in the series, and don't really know what a Zelda dungeon actually is. To a huge chunk of the community, the people the Zelda team will be aiming the next game at, this isn't and has never been a problem, as open-air Zelda is all they know. Zelda dungeons have been at the heart of the series since the very beginning. 1986's The Legend of Zelda, whose map was split into an open overworld and a tight, enclosed underworld. The design philosophy was that the players could freely explore Hyrule above, discover secrets in caves, battle enemies in the open plains, but the true progression was locked underground, in 9 subterranean dungeons. Each dungeon had a unique colour scheme and was packed with enemies, and, given it was the NES, some simple puzzles. They each contained an item which changed how Link played, like the raft which allowed him to cross small sections of water, or the bow that allows him to attack at range, and had a boss, which must be defeated to obtain a piece of the Triforce. Though Zelda 1 introduced this idea, it was really A Link to the Past that cemented the formula for Zelda dungeons that would endure up until the modern era. Though each subsequent game's dungeons differed in regards to gameplay mechanics, art style, and story importance, they all largely followed the blueprints of A Link to the Past, that being a series of rooms filled with puzzles or enemies, with progression locked behind keys, where Link unlocks a significant item which will allow him to complete the rest of the dungeon and defeat the boss. Breath of the Wild, of course, then broke these conventions, instead featuring the 4 divine beasts, which functioned somewhat like dungeons, and well over 100 shrines, mini-dungeons scattered around the massive overworld. While this new formula certainly has many advantages, overall, the general sentiment seems to be that it feels less satisfying than a traditional set of dungeons. dungeons. So we need to answer the question, what makes traditional Zelda dungeons good and the newer ones bad? Obviously, there are many reasons, and they'll differ depending on who you ask. I could talk about Zelda dungeons for hours, but for the sake of keeping this video simple, I'll focus on two of the most important issues with modern Zelda dungeons: identity and complexity. Let's start with identity, and where better to begin than with my favourite Zelda dungeon as an example, Ocarina of Time's Forest Temple. Link first encounters the Forest Temple when he's a child, when he finds Saria in her favourite spot, playing her song in the heart of the sacred forest meadow. She's sitting in the shadow of great, overgrown ruins, ominous, enticing, but for now inaccessible. When Link returns to the meadow as an adult and can use the hookshot to enter these ruins, he discovers that they're far more than just the archway he saw as a child. It leads into an ancient, forgotten mansion, consumed by the forest surrounding it. Everything from the empty, carpeted stone corridors to the haunting, ethereal music that plays here builds on the mystery of this place. Something once majestic, powerful, now slipping back into nature. Crucially, this atmosphere, this theme, is different to every other dungeon in the game. The Forest Temple stands out because it is singular, completely separate from the fire, water, shadow, or spirit temples. It has its own distinct identity. Compare this to Breath of the Wild's 4 divine beasts. While their design is incredible, having Link explore the innards of a great mechanical beast, it quickly grows stale. All 4 of them have the exact same ancient Chica design, the same variety of enemies, the same terminal structure, and almost the same boss. If the player knows what to expect before they've entered a dungeon, some of the magic is lost. It might seem shallow, but the theme and identity of a Zelda dungeon is often as important as its puzzles or enemies. And this seems to have been acknowledged by the Zelda team when developing Tears of the Kingdom. As Takizawa said, the sequel's dungeons carry their own regional look and feel. This is kind of true. The 5 main dungeons are definitely more distinct from one another than the Divine Beasts, but they still suffer from the same problems. While they have regional twists, at their core they're still just elemental variations of the same Zonai architecture, populated with the same construct enemies, solved with the same method of activating terminals. While some effort has clearly been taken to differentiate them, it hasn't worked well enough. The 4 main elemental dungeons, outside of the Spirit Temple, all fall into the same category of ancient place built by the Zonai once used by the native people of this region. They just don't feel as thematic as traditional Zelda dungeons, and that's something that the next entry in the series needs to address. The next overworld we explore needs to contain a selection of dungeons that are visually and thematically distinct from one another, to capture some of the magic older Zelda dungeons once did. If a game from 1998 can evoke such a powerful sense of mystery and awe, then the dungeons we see in the modern era should too. This issue isn't limited to the main dungeons of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, however. Far from it. The sheer lack of thematic variety is showcased best by the game's shrines. I'll go on record here saying that I love shrines. I expect that they will return in the sequel, and I absolutely think that they should. They serve to break up the gigantic overworld into chunks, with each shrine serving as something of a checkpoint, and I absolutely loved scouring through these games in search of them. However, they're perhaps the best example of the theming issue in these games' dungeons. The Shrines of Trials in Breath of the Wild and the Shrines of Light in Tears of the Kingdom are all so mind-numbingly monotonous. Breaking dungeons into bite-sized chunks scattered across the world is a brilliant concept, but in execution, it comes at the cost of the atmosphere and classic dungeon charm. These environments are so sterile, and, for a lack of a better term, video gamey, with absolutely none of the magic of the temples of old. So in the next open-air Zelda, I think we not only need to see a return to a set of main dungeons that are as distinct from one another as possible, but a different approach to shrines too. Like I said, I would love to see this idea return in some way, as I do think it really works to gamify travelling through these giant worlds, to break them up into manageable chunks by serving as rewards for exploring. But whatever shrines we see next need to be something more exciting and more varied than those of the Wild era. Perhaps by having more distinct regional themes, or by being found in the overworld itself rather than in a separately loaded area. Let's talk about the next issue, complexity, or rather the challenge that each dungeon poses to the player. But before we do, a quick word from this video's sponsor. In Zelda, even the trains are fun, largely thanks to Spirit Track's majestic overworld theme. Trains in real life are not as enjoyable. Unless you've got Raycon Everyday Earbuds Classic. Raycon were kind enough to sponsor this video and send me a pair of their Everyday Earbuds Classic, which are now my go-to choice for high quality sound on the move. They've got a tiny footprint, they're protected in a clamshell charging case, which you can further defend with these beautiful case covers, and they pack a punch, delivering comparable sounds to premium earbuds, of course with active noise cancellation, at a more affordable price. A huge thank you to Raycon for sponsoring this video. If you want to pick up your own Everyday Earbuds Classic, head to buyraycon.com/ZelticYT for 20% off. That's buyraycon.com/ZelticYT. Zelda games are designed to be approachable, with a near universal appeal. That said, the challenge posed by most of the dungeons, and many of the shrines, in the Wild era games seems out of sync with the difficulty of the games as a whole. They often feel too easy, especially compared to the challenges found in the world itself. Of course, the main focus of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is traversing Hyrule. That's the main gameplay loop. That's the soul of these games. But because of this emphasis, it feels like, too many times, these games' dungeons are less exciting, less challenging than the environment they're found in. The most egregious examples of this issue are found in Tears of the Kingdom, such as how a significant number of its shrines are simply tutorials for particular Zonai devices. There's no real challenge here at all. These aren't dungeons, they're lessons, and the shrines are therefore little more than glorified teleport locations. But this isn't a problem with the concept of shrines themselves. There are examples of shrines found in these games that are truly excellent, to the point where just playing them is a reward in itself, like the Maka Ra shrine in Breath of the Wild, Steady Thy Heart, not only found in a secret cave, but containing a proper mini dungeon, with multiple challenging rooms. Again, I'm not advocating for extreme difficulty here, just enough to make the player feel challenged. In this way, the overworld would not only be how Link gets to the dungeons, but how he prepares for them too, building up resources, strength and skill before delving into the darkness to face whatever lurks there. One way to make the next game's dungeons and shrines feel more challenging and significant would simply be to make them longer. Many of the Wild era games' dungeons, like Tears of the Kingdom's Wind and Water temples, are extremely short, and the same goes for a huge number of the shrines too. Entering a dungeon or discovering a shrine loses some of its magic if you know that there's a good chance you'll be done with it in 5 minutes, hardly long enough to immerse yourself. Part of this problem seems to come from the fact that there are just so many shrines, leading to the feeling that the content has been spread thin throughout them. I'd much prefer to see the next game include a smaller number of solid, lengthy shrine challenges, like Makara, than a larger number that's padded out with short, weak ones. Still plenty to spread across the map, but a small enough number to prevent them becoming stale. Another major issue with the challenge of these modern games is how easy it is to break their puzzles. This is a central idea to how these games are designed. They front-load the player with all the tools they'll need for their adventure and set them loose. Any problem they encounter can be solved in any way they like. If it works, it's not wrong. To a certain extent, this works really well. It's incredibly satisfying to conjure up your own way to scale a cliff or defeat a camp of enemies. But when it comes to the game's puzzles, I find that, after a while, I miss more structured, rigid ones with fixed solutions. I miss being given the pieces and having to work out the right way to put them together. Many of the puzzles in these games are like doing a crossword that lets you fill in any word in any place. You'll complete it quickly and feel really smart, but it's just not as satisfying. The most offensive examples of this are where abilities like Recall or Zonai vehicles can be used to skip traversing massive sections of dungeons. Once the player figures this out once, there's nothing to stop them doing it every time the game calls for them to cross a distance. Comparing this to even the easiest dungeons in Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword, which, while simple, still require the player to find the correct answers to their puzzles, it's a night and day difference. Shrines and dungeons posing significant challenges would give Link more reason to explore the world around them, to gain the strength needed to conquer it, and in doing so would make the dungeons themselves feel earned and memorable, not just obligatory content that often feels like it's only included because we expect it to be. Shrines and dungeons should test the player's abilities and be the real core of the game's difficulty. Now, I've been very careful to avoid talking about one particular Zelda game in this video, the most recent take on the new, open Zelda formula, Echoes of Wisdom. And that's because I think Echoes of Wisdom really does come close to landing a perfect balance between old and new. Every one of its dungeons are uniquely themed, with their own music, styles, bosses, and story significance, and many of them, especially the Faron and Lanayru temples, are complex and relatively difficult. Like the two Wild Era Zelda games, the player is given an exceptionally powerful set of sandbox tools. However, this time, the game makes an effort to prevent most of its puzzles being solved too easily. Granted, there are still examples of this issue here, such as in Jabul Ruins, where a Crawlchilla Echo can skip gigantic portions of the dungeon, but it's a step in the right direction, and if it's a sign of where the Zelda team might take the series, I think it's a good one. Overall, I'm a massive fan of the open-air Zelda formula, games which give you a world to explore and the freedom to explore it however you want. I'm really excited to see what's next, a game that we know will follow Breath of the Wild's formula. And I think that if it learns some lessons from what Zelda has already accomplished, by including a set of dungeons and shrines with unique themes and genuine complexity that pose a real challenge to the player, we'll finally see this new approach to Zelda reach its full potential. But what do you think? What do you want to see from dungeons in the next 3D Zelda game? Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, leave a like, and subscribe if you haven't already for more Zelda content. And of course, a massive thank you to Raycon for sponsoring this video. If you want to grab your own pair of Everyday Earbuds Classic, head to buyraycon.com/ZelticYT. Cheers guys, and I'll see you next time.